In this episode, I will reach out for strokes of darker shades from the palette of domestic politics, perhaps darker than you might think. The Armenian society lives within a polarized, black and white political reality. The party in power and the opposition have a decade-long history of irreconcilable approaches. They swapped roles through a sweeping and creative public discontent. The opposition now is the political descendant of previous governments. After the ruling party took over, war broke out with Azerbaijan, and the parties have been playing the blame game since. In this episode, I will try to fumble for a common ground for all with opposition MP Anna Grigoryan. If your party were behind the wheel of the country, would you negotiate with Azerbaijan for a political settlement?
Sure, we will. It goes without saying that political settlement of the issue and having cooperation with Azerbaijan and Turkey is on our agenda. Sometimes we're called the radical powers, the radical forces in the parliament, but it's not the reality. So we, of course, will negotiate with Azerbaijan. We will, of course, negotiate with Turkey to have cooperation in the region.
How would your position differ from the ruling parties then?
So the main difference is the following. The ruling party says that we can surrender anything just to have any paper which is called peace treaty. We're against this position because the time has shown that when you surrender everything, Azerbaijan doesn't stop. There are no red lines for them, so they demand more and more. So this government recognized Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. Then all the red lines have been blurred, but still we see that Azerbaijan is not willing to sign a peace treaty. So we say that there should be red lines we need to follow so that we can really reach peace in the region.
One of the main differences in approach just surfaced. While the ruling party accepts responsibility for the defeat in war that Aliyev started and is willing to make concessions to control the risk of further escalation, the opposition are hardliners. They believe concessions spiral the situation downwards. But do they have an alternative? You always demand of the ruling party not to make concessions with Azerbaijan. Do you not believe that this could lead to another laceration of the country?
So what else is left to surrender? What other concessions can make Armenia so that Azerbaijan says, okay, let's start a new page, let's start the peace. So what else can this government what other concessions can they make? There is nothing left, believe me. So there is no Nagorno-Karabakh currently. It is thoroughly occupied by Azerbaijan. There are territorial occupations by Azerbaijan. So our compatriots are in Baku, in prison. So they do not... So there is nothing they're ready to make their concessions. All in all, the negotiations are about concessions from the both sides. If you make all possible concessions and impossible concessions, and you say that you see that Azerbaijan doesn't make anything, it means this is capitulation. This is nothing else but capitulation. And if you believe that making capitulation you can reach peace and stability in the region, it's impossible. There should be concessions from the both sides.
If your party comes to power and you draw hard lines, do you believe that the small state like Armenia is ready to face the consequences?
By the way, I'm not talking about hard lines, first of all. So is it a hard line when we say that Azerbaijani troops have to withdraw from sovereign Armenian territories? Do you think it's a hard line? Do you think that peace can come when Azeri forces are standing in our sovereign territories? I believe not. You can never speak about peace when Azeri soldiers occupy your territories, the roads, strategic points, and they see everything in our country. So it's not a hard line. The second thing, do you imagine a peace when your compatriots are in prison? They are tortured there. When I say we need to have our own Armenian agenda, this also means that our compatriots have to come to Armenia. It's not a hard line. So when we're talking about Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh, about their right to go back to their homeland, it's not a hard line. The whole international community recognizes the implementation of this right. The only subject is this government that rejects, ignores the possibility of implementation of this agenda. We say, I mean, these are so simple things. We're not talking about such huge, impossible agendas. So withdrawal of Azerbaijani troops from the territory, sovereign Armenian territories, is one of the main points that we need to reach if we really want to have peace. So these are simple things I'm talking about.
Can you see any common ground with the ruling party, whether this is about internal affairs or external affairs, or is change of government the only purpose that the opposition has?
It's not the purpose, it's just the first step. Because when we have this government and we have radical contradictions with this government, we see that in case this government stays in power, we only lose and lose. We lose everything, territories, our diplomatic red lines, so everything we lose. And we say that the change of the government will at least give some space for us, for Armenian population, for our country to breathe and bring a new agenda on the table of negotiations. So it's not just the only purpose, it's simply the first step of making real politics in the region. What I have just mentioned, to bring Armenian agenda. When you say, do you have common grounds? I cannot believe I can have common grounds with a government that stops talking about prisoners of war, that stops talking about deoccupation of our territories. So I think I cannot have a common ground with this government, and the government that imprisons people for their political views, for their political ideas. So I do not believe I can have common grounds with this government.
Armenian parliamentarians are like oil and water. They do not mix, and this often results in public spectacles. A democracy in action. This picture could be diverting if it didn't spill over into the society. But the political audience is affected, infected, and even torn into ideologically irreconcilable segments. You, the opposition, blame the ruling party of treason, basically. The Prime Minister says, I accept responsibility for the defeat in war and consequent losses, but, he says, I'm not the only one responsible. Do you and your party, as a political descendant of a previous Armenian government, accept your share in bringing the state to its knees?
No. Well, first of all, it's just Nikol Pashinyan was in power when the war started, but it didn't start out of the blue. There were there were realities that were created by also Nikol Pashinyan. What I mean by saying this, in 2019, Minsk Group co-chairmanship provided a new document of settlement of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, but unfortunately, Nikol Pashinyan didn't go through negotiations. He didn't start the negotiation. And yesterday in the parliament he says, well, I didn't even start the negotiations, but this is why we blame you, that you, instead of getting into negotiation process, you went to Nagorno-Karabakh and said that Nagorno-Karabakh is Armenia, period. And then there were Tavush, what happened in Tavush. And after that, as Zorab Mnatsakanyan, former foreign minister, said, after Tavush incident, the normalization of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict through negotiations was over. So there was no possibility of having negotiations and settlement of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict through negotiations.
Does
so what
Aliyev
I say,
hold any responsibility for the war and its consequences?
Well, so I have to be more clear here. Aliyev is aggressor. Aliyev started the war. It goes without saying, so this is a fact. What I say is that Nikol Pashinyan provided all the possibilities for Aliyev, unleashed his hands to start the war, to start the aggression. This is why we blame Nikol Pashinyan We blame him for getting out of the negotiation process and doing things and making statements that simply helped Aliyev to start the aggression. And so the international community stayed silent because he was provided with these cards, I mean the cards that Pashinyan gave him.
The party in power brings up a contrasting argument. Where were the previous Armenian authorities looking when Azerbaijan was arming heavily for dozens of years in an obvious preparation for a revanche? The reason of Aliyev's launching war is that he was armed to the teeth and at a convenient timing resorted to force, the ruling party says. The Armenian nation hit a strange record of re-electing the party that lost the war. What's your explanation for this?
Well, first of all, there were a lot of manipulations from this government, from the ruling party. You know, until today, nobody knows what was negotiated previously. And if you follow the narratives in the public sphere, so what Pashinyan says, there has never been a variant, a negotiation plan where Nagorno-Karabakh was not part of Azerbaijan, which is not true. At least in Key West, Nagorno-Karabakh, together with Lachin Corridor, was becoming part of Armenia. So a lot of people still do not know what was negotiated previously, and Pashinyan used these manipulations to show that he has nothing to do with the war. He has nothing to do with the loss in the war. So with these manipulations, he, of course, managed to get re-elected. But the second important thing is that he tried to position himself as the power that will lead us to peace. So he said that I'm going to bring you peace. So he, of course, couldn't do that.
Do you not believe that this is his true intention?
It could be his true intentions. It could be true, but the results are different. We are nowhere close to peace, just the opposite. Today we're closer to war, not to peace. So he failed. He failed in his promise. He failed in everything. He failed in his main promise to bring peace to our nation. In 2021, a lot of people voted for him because they hoped, at least, that Pashinyan was the person to bring us to peace. But he failed, and a lot of people would associate us with war. Of course, it's kind of interesting because the only power that could be directly associated with war is Nikol Pashinyan, because during his tenure, Armenia went through a horrible war. But a lot of people associated us with war and Pashinyan with peace, and they voted for him. So two things: manipulations by the government and this hope for peace. So I think those manipulations do not work anymore, and our whole population really has this idea that Pashinyan is not the person who brings us to peace. He made all possible concessions, all possible and impossible concessions. But at the end of the day, we're closer to war and not to peace.
What is the way out that the party you represent sees?
So first of all, this government has to go, because he's not a reliable partner for everyone. So after that, we need to start negotiations with new agenda, with new people. So what I've already said, as a person who had the chance to see what's written in the draft peace treaty, I can definitely tell you that there is no single point that is about our Armenian interests. Nothing is there. They're all Azerbaijani demands, and there is no single point there that really Armenian population can get out of it. So nothing positive for us. So when I say this government has to go, is because they didn't manage during these 5 years after the war, bring a single Armenian agenda on the table.
Do you believe that if you put on the negotiations table an agenda that is in accordance with Armenian interests, Aliyev will say yes to it?
Okay, what's the alternative? So negotiations are about interests of both sides. If you want to tell me that we need to only follow interests of Azerbaijan, so where is Armenia then? Where is Armenia then? So there is a huge propaganda in our population that we can do nothing. There is nothing we can do. And so we need to surrender. We need to succumb anything they want. I'm against this propaganda because, once again, if really we want to have peace in the region, stability, then we need to have this concessions from the both sides. I'm not talking about big things. At least the withdrawal of Azerbaijani troops from sovereign Armenian territories is one step. Do you believe that we can have peace when Azerbaijani troops are standing on our territories, controlling the main roads? I come from Syunik region. When I got to Syunik, I know that the road I cross is thoroughly observed by Azeris because they have taken the strategic points, the strategic heights. So I say I do want peace. We do want peace. Whole of our population wants peace. We want nothing but peace. But there are things that have to be done. And one of those things is the withdrawal of Azeri troops from sovereign Armenian territories.
Do you believe that the international community has an important role to play in reaching peace in South Caucasus, and what is that role?
So this is a very important point because what we see today is that there are only bilateral talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and out of those talks we see that, yes, Azerbaijani side demands, and they make the concessions. This government makes the concessions. So we say that we also need international community to be involved in these negotiations, to have some balance, because we, as a country, lost the war, and so we need to have international community involved to balance this situation. And unfortunately, this government says we do not need the third party to get involved. We can settle all the issues with Azeris, and we see what we have today. Yes, we believe that international community has to get involved. There are huge transformations in the world going on. After the election of Trump, we see that changes is going to happen also in the region, in the bigger region. But we need to refrain from talks only with Azerbaijan without getting the third party involved.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
After the opposition MP's dark prophecy that Pashinyan's peace agenda will fail, a Bible verse comes to the mind. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Proverbs 13:12. The small country has been lacerated by a dozen-year blockade in between two wars. Peace is about survival to Armenia. While major players are establishing a new world order, a lot of uncertainty is around. Navigating through is and will be a major challenge for the ruling party, next to unrelenting domestic opponents.